Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel, drop a like on the video. You know the drill, it's hot takes. Let's get into it. James Harden absolutely clears Allen Iverson both at their peaks and all time, and honestly there is no argument. Yes, there is an argument. The argument is I like Allen Iverson more, and I'm going to ignore what is just blatantly true. And that's pretty much what the people on that side of the argument have. James Harden is without a doubt a significantly better player than Allen Iverson, and that's not a knock on Allen Iverson because Allen Iverson was a very, very good player. I have him as, I think, like 35th all time or something like that. But James Harden is routinely one of the most underrated and disrespected all-time great players the game has ever seen, simply because he couldn't overcome the Kevin Durant Warriors, which that is a video that I plan on making at some point because it is certainly an interesting legacy that man has. I understand a lot of the reasons why a lot of people don't like James Harden, and because of that, I don't love James Harden. But just looking at what he is as a talent objectively, absolutely he's way better than Allen Iverson. And I'm sorry if you disagree with that, but it's just true. Larry Bird would not be a superstar in this era. I don't know how you can watch Nikola Jokic be arguably the best player in basketball and make this argument. Like, the whole thing that people say about Larry Bird is like he just wouldn't be physically capable enough. But, like, the guy was 6'10", and, yeah, he couldn't jump for shit, and he wasn't particularly fast. But he's also one of the most skilled players of all time. So I think he'd be just fine. I think he'd be shooting, like, 6 threes a game. I think he'd be dominant in the post. I think he'd be, honestly, I think he'd be quite similar to Nikola Jokic, just a little bit smaller. It's ludicrous to suggest that Larry Bird would not be a superstar in today's game when Jokic is doing what he's doing right now. I'm not saying those guys are one-to-one comparisons, but just like a large guy who is completely athletically inept but incredibly skillful, Jokic is a superstar under those circumstances in today's game, so why wouldn't Larry Bird be the same thing? I don't understand why people believe this. The Pelicans are going to make the Western Conference Finals. Yeah, that's a bit of a stretch, but I definitely do believe they are talented enough to be a playoff team this year, and I'm definitely going to be interested to see. Just, of course, you have to have the caveat, assuming that Zion's health permits that to be the case. But CJ, who was fucking crazy good for the Pelicans when he played for them, Brandon Ingram, pretty well-rounded roster, Jonas Valanciunas, and Zion. A lot of offense. Defense is what would hold me back from saying they can be like a potential Western Conference Finals team, but they are definitely good, and I think they will be a playoff team. The Detroit Pistons are a play-in team. I definitely think that's really very well within the realm of possibility, but I'm probably going to, if I had to be a betting man, I'd probably say no. But like, if we get a second-year explosion from Cade Cunningham, we get a pretty good rookie year from there. Guy who is escaping me the name of the guy that they drafted right now. If we get something like that, absolutely they could be a bordering on play-in team, but I'd probably lean towards no, but I fully think it's, I would not be surprised by it is the best way to put it. Why do we criticize Wilt for being a statistical monster and not a winner, but when LeBron loses and puts up stats, it's not an issue? Hot take, they both should garner the same respect. There's a key difference in that. While I wouldn't argue against the notion that LeBron occasionally stat pads. The difference is that that's kind of like after a win or a loss is a foregone conclusion. LeBron is always making the best play to win at any given moment when the game is in question. Whereas Wilt Chamberlain was always about his numbers. In fact, I don't believe that Wilt Chamberlain gets criticized enough for being about his numbers. There are multiple reports and anecdotes that you can find of the guy like just caring about his numbers simply too much. And I don't think like if you have a 50 piece, knowing you have a 50 piece is like inherently bad thing. I feel like people freak out about that shit too much when like James Harden's looking at his score in the middle of the game. I think that's fine. But genuinely, if all you care about is numbers over winning, which Wilt did for many years of his career, which is the reason he came up so short, I think there's a huge leap between that and when the Lakers are down 30 and LeBron is still in the game. I think there's a huge difference between those two. Is it still some stat padding? Is it still a little bit like, come on, dude? Sure. But I think you are drastically underestimating the kind of caring about numbers that Wilt Chamberlain did. If Kyrie gets traded to the Lakers would then be a super team. On paper, sure, 2 superstars and an all-star. Although I'm beginning to question if I believe even a perfectly healthy AD is a superstar. He was in 2020, but like maybe that's it. I don't know. I mean, yes. But there's, again, it's kind of like, sure, I guess last year's Lakers had the qualifications of a super team. But, like, things are more important than just what's on paper. I would say, yes, the Lakers, if they traded for Kyrie, are on paper a super team. Whether or not what is on paper comes to fruition and whether or not it actually results in good basketball, we would have to see. But at least I do agree, on paper, very, very good team. But we've seen, especially with Kyrie Irving teams, we've seen with the Lakers last year, on paper, is very much not everything. Shaq's final stats look so gaudy because he encountered Rick Smits and Big Mac. Only good center in his finals was Dikembe, who was old but still defensive player of the year level but not Hawks Mutombo. When Shaq encountered a great front court in the West, Kobe was the best player in those series. Take the 0-1 Spurs for example. I do believe there was a time in Kobe and Shaq's duo-ness. That's not a word. Like 2001 and 2002, I think Kobe and Shaq were actually pretty neck and neck in terms of level of talent. For that Pacers championship, absolutely Shaq was a way better player than Kobe Bryant. And any time before that, of course. But if we are looking at after that, if you look at their playoff contributions in total, their actual playoff averages, their playoff contributions for 2001 and 2002, I think 2001 especially, like they literally averaged the same points per game. It's very comparable. But when the finals came around, Shaq was always the guy who got the main focus, the guy who got the most shots, and he always had a more favorable matchup than Kobe Bryant. Where you look at the defenders that Kobe had, he actually had some pretty good defenders on him in those finals. Meanwhile, Shaq had, as you mentioned, Rick Smits, Big Mac, who was just this really fucking fat Southern dude, if I remember correctly, and he had Mutombo, but Mutombo was really scrawny and older, so Shaq was still able to physically dominate him more so than the average really good defensive big man. So, yeah, like Shaq just had the favorable matchup in the finals, but I do believe, like, I think 2002 was Kobe Bryant's peak as a player, personally speaking, which I realize is a hot take, and I've talked about that before. But, like, his all-around game was just the best it was while being that lethal of a scorer. I do think that is an underestimated part of this duo. If you especially look at some of the playoff rounds, there are multiple rounds of the playoffs within their 3 championships where Kobe was the best player. But when it came time for like when there was actual a finals MVP award, it was no question who it was going to because Shaq was dominating the competition, the honestly relatively weak competition in the finals. Kawhi Leonard is top 15 all time. Fuck regular season longevity. The dude had 2 finals MVPs, one of them clear cut, and is an absolute monster on both ends. Look, as somebody who is vehemently in the side of your peak matters more than longevity. That's a real, like, that's peak is very important to me versus longevity. I think longevity is often overrated in this conversation. You can't be so lacking in longevity that all you have is basically those finals MVPs and like some decent regular season numbers when you play 40 games a season. It's an exaggeration, but still relatively true. So yeah, Kawhi just simply needs to get more numbers in both the regular season and the postseason under his belt for me to say he's 15. I believe when I did my top whatever list way back in the day, I actually had Kawhi at 15, but I would change that now. There's no chance in hell I'd have him there now. All of my all-time lists all of my lists that are publicly available, there are things that I would change about them now because it was years ago, and the way that I view and value basketball is fundamentally different. That said, no, Kawhi is not top 15. I'd probably put him like 25 or so. He just simply needs to accomplish more, even if his peak like year with Toronto was really, really good. You need more than that, because like if we're looking at what he's done outside of 2019, I don't think there's any playoff run that has contributed more to a player's individual legacy other than maybe like 2006 Wade and 2001 Allen Iverson. So yeah, no, I disagree with that take. I don't believe he is 15. But anyways, that was Hot Takes. Goodbye.